Greetings, ladies and gentlemen, EQOA Nostalgia here, and I'm pretty happy today because I've got an excuse to pester you guys about EverQuest Online Adventures. If you're a subscriber to my channel, you're no stranger to EverQuest Online Adventures, as I seem to always talk about it whenever I bring up an MMORPG. However, it's been quite a while since I've just talked specifically about EverQuest Online Adventures, and considering today is the 11th anniversary of EQOA, now some of you might be thinking to yourselves, well gee, it's been shut down so it doesn't really count. But for me it does count, because it's still the 11th anniversary for the fans of the game. So I was sitting around and I was thinking to myself, what made the game so special for so many people? And why is it that nothing we seem to play can replace it, or at least come close? And I think for me one of the reasons is that it felt more like a living, breathing world than it did a fetch quest style game. Now, there were quests in the game, but there weren't a lot of them. If you were a fan of the game, you're well aware of that. We did have quests in between here and there, but typically for me, whenever it came time to do a quest, it was more just like a pain in the ass to me than anything else. Now, I know some people probably don't feel that way. I think they probably feel that it helped to break up the monotony of grinding, but I liked the grinding in the game. And that just brings me to a point that I wanted to make. There seems to be this overall feeling that grinding is a bad thing in MMORPGs now. People look at grinding, and not just MMORPGs, but RPGs, as a bad thing. It's looked down upon. And for the life of me, I can't understand that. From the way I take it, from what I've read, people don't want to grind. They want to level up, but they want to do it in a way where it doesn't feel like they're leveling up, where it doesn't feel like they had to really work at it. It should come natural, or it should be something that's really easy to do, and it should be incorporated into the game in a clever way as to make you feel like you're not grinding. And the tendency is to have a bunch of quests where you do a quest and then you move on to the next area, you complete the quests in that area and you move on, and there's like a little bit of story there, and that's okay. I mean, it's alright, but you're still grinding, and people don't really look at it like that. You're still grinding. You're just grinding quests. So it doesn't really make much sense to me. So that's one of the things about World of Warcraft that kind of threw me off. I remember the first time I started playing World of Warcraft, I was just going out and killing stuff, and I was thinking to myself, man, this is so slow. How come it's taking me forever to level up? And I just, I was trying to look for camps. I don't know how many of you guys did that, but I'm probably, not the only one who went out there and said, hey, this looks like a really cool cave. Let's kill these things for a couple of hours. And, 20, 30 minutes in, you realize you haven't really gotten anywhere. And I remember talking to people about it, and they're like, well, yeah, you're not going to level up fast if you just kill shit, man. You got to do quests. And, I kind of adapted to that after a while, and I started doing it. But I never really fully embraced it the way I did grinding. Because for me, it was more fun to just go out into the world and find a camp. There were camps that people never really heard about or never went to because there were popular camps and there were places that people didn't really explore. And it was really risky, so exploration was tough to do. I mean, you had to be careful, and often you would end up getting yourself killed trying to find a cool camp that nobody had ever been to. And camps always used to change in EQOA. Whatever was popular one week wasn't the next week, and people were like, well, we're not going there anymore, we're going here. Because it always changed, because people were always looking for newer camps and better camps to go to, something to change up the scenery. Maybe somebody found out that something dropped from this camp that you couldn't get in another camp, and that was extremely fun and exciting for me, and I don't know, it just pulled me into the world more. So yeah, when I fired up WoW, I was looking for camps. I was going around saying, this one looks like a pretty good camp, well, I'll check this place out. And, there were no rewards for it. There wasn't really anything that dropped that really mattered. If you wanted something to drop that mattered at all, it was usually in an instance or a raid. You had to go through dungeons and shit like that. And I don't know, man. It was different, I mean, in EverQuest Online Adventures, you just went into the dungeon. You didn't have to get into an instance. And I understand the perks of that. If you get into an instance, other people can't come in and you're not fighting over mobs. But there's something that gets lost in that. Because now, all of a sudden, it doesn't feel like part of the world. It feels like you just went into this little teleport and you're in your own little dimension. Now, that's cool because you get all the loot that goes to you and nobody else comes in and steals anything. Because, I remember several times when I was camping mobs, people would come in and steal them, and that did suck. So that was one thing that kind of got on my nerves, and it would lead to trains, and you'd have trains and all sorts of shit. You know, you'd have a lot of drama and stuff like that. But I don't know, I think I'd rather have that and feel like it was actually part of the world than just give you your own separate little universe where people go in, they don't say 2 words to each other, they get what they want to get, and they leave. So yeah, that's just something about modern MMORPGs that I don't like. The questing, it gets on my nerves because it just feels like it's just, okay, go here, go there, go here, go there, go here, go there, go here, go there. And before you know it, you're in a new zone. And then it's go here, go there, go here, go there, go here, go there. That's a pain in the ass. That feels more grindy to me than sitting in a camp and killing mobs. I don't know, I guess I shouldn't use grindy, I should say monotonous. It's more monotonous for me to have to go and kill 15 boars and get 15 boar asses. And, you know, you end up killing 30 boars before you get 15 boar asses, and then, you know, you're doing the same thing over and over again. Now, I understand that if you're sitting in a camp, you're doing the same thing over and over again, but you're talking to people. That's another thing that you don't really have anymore. I found when I play World of Warcraft, I'm mostly doing solo. It's mostly solo until I get to end game, and then I do raids and stuff with people that I really don't like. They're not nice people. Most of the people I've raided with are not nice. They just want their gear. They want everything, you know, min-maxed. Everything has to be perfect. You have to be doing your role perfect. And there's people looking at fucking DPS charts. I mean, I remember when I first started getting into raiding, there were people that were like, dude, you suck. Your DPS is fucking shit, dude. And I'm going, what? Yeah, dude, your DPS sucks. You need to gear up, bro. And, you know, I walked away from it like, that's okay. I guess I'll go check this shit. And I asked people about it. I'm like, this dude said my DPS sucked. I mean, what do I need to do to change that? Because I felt bad. You know, it made me feel like shit. There's people like you suck, man. And I felt like I was doing great. You know, I'm pushing all the keys. I'm doing my role. I'm killing shit. But apparently I wasn't. I was doing bad because I didn't have the best gear. And that's another thing. It's all about the gear in most of these games. And, you know, gear was always important in EQOA, but it wasn't like a deciding factor. As long as you knew your class and you knew what you were doing, you were pretty much good to go. Now it's more about gear and getting that DPS meter up there, whatever it is you're doing. It's mostly about the DPS game for me. There's people that are probably, you know, they're tanks. And I would never be a tank anyway, because it's just too much pressure for me. I'm not one of those people who likes to lead the charge, and if everything falls apart, it's my fault. I don't like that. And I feel sorry for a lot of these people in World of Warcraft because, you know, people were always brutal if the tank failed, but man, it's really toxic now. But anyway, I'm getting off topic here. The point is, I had to go and download a program, I can't remember what the hell it's called, to watch my DPS. And I had to like grow my DPS and make sure I've got the best gear. And then a month later, my gear sucks, and now I have to go grind more gear. And that's all it really is in World of Warcraft, and a lot of games are like that now, where it's all about the gear. You get to the end game, and no longer is it about leveling up and having fun and exploring the world and talking to people. It's about gear. Gear, 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 all fucking day. Gear. That's all it is. That's all you care about is gear. Why do you raid? For gear. Well, how do you get into a raid? You gotta have good gear. That's all it is. It's a fucking gear game. I can't stand that, man. You know, nobody talks. That's another thing. Everything happens so quickly that nobody speaks to each other because they're all watching their 50 fucking cooldowns. You know, they're sitting there and they're watching their cooldowns and they're spamming their buttons. And if they don't have everything going in a perfect order, their DPS suffers because of it. And then God forbid if your DPS suffers and you drop down, you'll be kicked from the fucking raid. Now, I know there's a lot of people who don't do the whole pickup group stuff, or, you know, they don't queue up for raids, they go in with their friends. But I never really found a raiding guild in WoW. Maybe that's one of the biggest problems, but still, for me, it's just not the same. And running dungeons and stuff like that, you know, you queue up for the dungeon, and you go into the dungeon. Now, I remember Vanilla WoW, where people had to actually run out to the dungeon. I enjoyed that. I liked that. Most people are probably thinking, well, what are you talking about? That was terrible having to run all the way out there for 20 minutes. I liked it. I enjoyed it. It made me feel like I was part of the world because I had to go out there. And then everything just kind of got dumbed down more and more and more. And that's just something that tends to happen with RPGs over time, isn't it? They get dumbed down. I don't know what it is, but they get dumbed down. They like to make things easier, more accessible. You know, all of a sudden you can fly everywhere now, and you can teleport everywhere now, and that makes the world feel smaller and more insignificant. And I never end up playing World of Warcraft for long, or any modern MMORPG for very long, for that matter, because it just gets on my nerves. I sit around and I'm thinking, what am I doing here? You know, I haven't really made any friends. There's no intelligent conversation going around. People aren't talking. In fact, the only time people tend to talk to each other is when they're pissed off, when they're mad about your DPS, or the tank's not doing this, or the healer's not doing that. That's all it seems to be. It's just very toxic. Nobody's very nice anymore. And I think part of the problem is there's so many people now that it's just, nobody really cares. The communities are really just so massive that you don't have to worry about your name. In EverQuest Online Adventures and in EverQuest, you had to worry about your name. You had to worry about your reputation. If you weren't a reputable individual and you were an asshole, people knew that. People talked about you. They're like, well, don't ever group with this guy. He's a dick. We got in a group with him, and all he did was complain. And, you know, all he did was steal stacks from the tank and things like that. You got to know about people, and you were very careful about your reputation. And now with a lot of games, when you go into dungeons, especially World of Warcraft, and I'm picking on WoW a lot, I know that, because that's mostly the game that I've played in terms of more modern games. And nobody really cares, because when you queue for a dungeon, you don't ever have to see them again. They can come from whatever server. It doesn't matter. Same thing with the raids. When you do the pickup group raids, it doesn't matter where you're from. You're never going to see these people again. So you can act like a total dick. In EverQuest Online Adventures, there was a bond there between everybody. Everybody knew everyone. I guess I would equate it to living in a small town. You know those postcards you see, those Christmas postcards, and it's a small little village, and everybody knows each other, and they all go out caroling, and they're holding hands, and they're one big happy fucking family. That's EverQuest Island Adventures. And then you look at like a big city like New York City where nobody cares, and it's just a bunch of people, just craziness, going back and forth, they're going about their day, and nobody takes time to talk to one another. That's kind of what it's like now. So yeah, I mean, what do we have here? We've got EverQuest Island Adventures on one hand, where it was very hard to do things by yourself. You needed a group, and that created bonds between people because they relied on one another. And it was very fun. You got into your role because you knew, I am the guy who's doing the damage, or I'm the guy who's keeping everybody alive right now, and that's me, and this guy's the tank. Everybody had their roles, and you got together and you made friends that way. You explored the world. The world was very dangerous. You couldn't just run away from things. Shit would chase you for the entire zone, and you probably wouldn't get away if you pulled the attention of something that was, you know, able to kick your ass. In World of Warcraft, you can just get away from things a lot easier. And that's one of the things right there. It just doesn't feel as adventurous. It's not as dangerous. And, you know, World of Warcraft is mostly solo until you get to endgame. You don't really group with anyone. And I remember playing WoW with my wife. And I remember I had played it solo before I played with her. And then I started playing with her. And it felt like it was more work. Like it was more of a pain in the ass that she was in my group. Because, well, now instead of having to get 12 boar asses, I have to get 24 boar asses because she needs some too. Now, I know they changed things a little bit now, where like if you loot something, it goes to the other person as well, and they change things up to make it a little bit better, but it still feels more like work when you're with somebody else. It feels easier to just go off on your own. There isn't really any benefit to grouping with someone. You don't care about camps, you know, you just run past them and you're like, yeah, there's a bunch of mobs there, who cares? If it's not related to a quest, it doesn't matter, and then you move on. There was something special about EverQuest Island Adventures, and the fact that you would look back fondly on a camp, like the bandit camp just outside of Darver Manor. If you show that to someone who played EverQuest Island Adventures, immediately they get the nostalgia bug, and they're like, oh my god, you know, they get that look in their eye. We're like, oh man, I remember that. You know, I showed my wife one of the videos that Elutra had uploaded, and it was about, you know, Darver Manor and the bandit camp and all that stuff, and you could see it in her face. I remember I was looking at her when she was watching it, and she just had this feeling, you know, this look in her eye, like, wow, you know, I remember that, and I really missed that. And if you were to take a look at World of Warcraft later, you don't really have those feelings when you look at a camp. You're like, yeah, it's something that I did a quest for it with, and yeah, that's cool. Like, I look at WoW, with a little bit of nostalgia. When I hear the music and stuff, I'm like, yeah, I remember when I first started playing that, and the towns like where I first started in the Night Elf City and shit like that, Darnassus. And I don't know. It's just not the same, man. You just don't get nostalgic about games anymore. At least I know I don't. There might be some World of Warcraft guy out there who's like, what are you talking about? I'm totally nostalgic about it, but I don't have any of that. It's not a personal experience. It's just so impersonal. Go here, go there, kill this, kill that, and nobody cares about anything. Nothing is made special or sacred. It's kind of like fast food. I've said this before, and somebody was like, oh my god, that's actually, dude, you nailed it. World of Warcraft is like fast food, and EverQuest Online Adventures is like going out to a restaurant. And you remember that restaurant 20 years later, you're like, oh, I remember when we went there. That place was awesome. And then you look at McDonald's and you're like, it's fucking McDonald's, man. I don't have any nostalgia for it. I go there and I get burgers and, yeah, whatever, you know. I go through the drive-thru, big deal. But that's how I compare it, and I think that's a fairly accurate assessment. Wouldn't you agree? I don't know. There's just no socialization for me. Maybe I'm doing it wrong. I don't know, but I don't make friends on World of Warcraft. I play DC Universe now, and I've been playing it off and on, and it's a fun game. I enjoy it. I really enjoy it. I like the whole superhero thing. I like the way my costume looks, and I specialize my character to look really unique, and I love that aspect of the game, but I don't talk to anyone. I'm not in any guilds. I've been invited to guilds, but I get in there and nobody says anything and I end up leaving. What's the point? What's the point of a guild if you don't make friends, if you don't talk to people? And I recently started playing Final Fantasy XIV. That's a pretty fun game. Now, it's more fast-paced, like a World of Warcraft style game where it's more action style and people don't really take the time to talk. But I'm in a guild where we talk to one another. And I've actually made a few friends. And we get together and we do things and we explore the world and we have fun. So that's a little bit closer to what I'm looking for, but it's still more World of Warcraft than it is EverQuest Online Adventures. And with EQOA and EverQuest, they just dumped you into the world. Sure, they gave you a few starting quests to get you familiar with where to go throughout the city and everything, but then they were just like, yeah, have at it. Go do what you gotta do. And I think if they released a game like that nowadays, an MMORPG like that today, people would just log off because they wouldn't know what to do. They'd just be writing reviews. Oh, the game doesn't give you any direction. They don't tell you where to go. They just dump you in the world and they leave you to your own devices, and it's terrible. That's what I would expect to read in an article for a game if it was like EverQuest Online Adventures released today. I'll never forget when I first spawned in Narak. I had no idea what I was doing or where I was going, and I loved it. I absolutely loved it. Now, there's a lot of people out there that would be discouraged by that. They would be like, what the hell is this? I don't know where to go. Oh my god, it's so overwhelming. And they wouldn't play ever again. And they tell everybody the game sucks because they couldn't figure out how the hell to even get out of the city. I loved that. Because, I don't know, there's just this feeling today that people just want to progress. They want to go, 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 go. And they don't take time to stop and smell the roses, so to speak. And I don't know, you have to have a completely different mindset when you play a game like EQOA, because, like I said, it's all about the journey. And there were people who were like, I remember I had guild members who were like, dude, you need to hurry up and get to end cap. And I'm like, I don't want to do that. I'm taking my time, you know what I mean? And then I remember getting to the end cap, and it just wasn't as fun. I went and I rolled another character. And people are like, what the hell, you're not raiding with us? I never really got into raiding. You know, that's kind of like a dirty little secret that I haven't really told anybody because I'm kind of ashamed of it. I never really got into raiding on EverQuest Online Adventures, guys. I know there's a lot of people who love playing the sky and all that shit, but I don't know. For me, it was all about the journey to end cap, and once I got there, I felt like, okay, I had achieved something. Now let's go try something else. And I had altaholic syndrome, where I had to keep rolling alts because I wanted to experience the different classes and the different starting zones. And, you know, now it's not about that. It's all about the race to endgame. And, you know, I know there were people that raced to endgame on EverQuest Online Adventures. I know for a fact because as soon as Frontiers came out, we had level 60s within like a day or two. And these guys just grinded like hardcore. And I never really understood that. What's the point? I don't know. I guess I'm different. I don't care about that stuff. I'm all about getting there, exploring the world, and having fun with my friends. And I'm looking at EverQuest next, and I'm pretty excited for it. And not because it's old school or hardcore, but because they're promising us that the world, you're going to care about the world. The world is going to change. It's going to be an adventure, and you're going to go out and you're going to find things and you're just going to have fun. And they said, well, we'll have quests here and there, but they're not going to be like, exclamation points over people's heads. You're going to discover quests and you're going to want to unlock classes, and that sounds really fun to me. That sounds fun. It sounds fresh and exciting, but at the same time it reminds me of the old days. If they can bring that back to me, where the focus is on exploring the world, adventure, and danger, then I am going to absolutely love EverQuest next. I don't care if it's more action-based. That doesn't really bother me. It does in a way, because then the communities won't be as tight, there won't be as much talking. But as long as we get that sense of adventure and that epic world exploration back, I think that's what I miss more than anything else. I mean, because we do have a community. A lot of the community members still keep in touch, and that's really cool. So we can bring the community with us. Maybe we'll just talk over Skype or, whatever voice chat program people decide on using. Maybe we can just do that. The community's already together for that. So, I don't know. While it is nice to have the slower paced combat and people talk to each other, I don't know. I think when it comes down to it, if I had to put my finger on it, what I miss the most is the exploration, the danger, the adventure, and yeah, just the overall feeling that you're in an epic, massive world and just go have at it. That's what I miss. And Pantheon Rise of the Fallen is another game that is supposed to be bringing that back. Now, if you're not aware of what that is and you haven't seen my previous videos, I suggest you go check out my Pantheon videos, because Brad McQuaid is heading up that game. It's on Kickstarter right now, and it's only got a few days left, and it's coming down to the wire. It doesn't really look like we're going to make that goal unless we get a serious boost in sales and pledges within the next few days. And that's really sad to me, because he's promising an old school EverQuest style game, and I know a lot of you guys are dying for a game like that. And it really, I gotta be honest, it pains me to see so many people without a home. They're just drifting from game to game and nothing seems to be the same anymore. They're not really playing as much as they used to, and they just can't seem to find a home anywhere. That bums me out, and I know how you guys feel, because I don't stick with anything very long at all. I mostly play single player games and things on Steam, stuff like that. I don't really play MMORPGs anymore. I do play them, but not nearly as much as I used to. I don't get completely involved in them. Every now and then I get the itch to play an MMORPG, a fantasy MMORPG, with trolls and ogres and, orcs and all that stuff, the fantasy style stuff. So I'll resub to World of Warcraft. But then I stick around for about a month, maybe 2 or 3 months. And then I just leave, because it's the same thing happens again. I get up to the end game content, I get done with grinding the quests and all that shit, and then it's all about the gear. And the funny thing is I hadn't played EverQuest Online Adventures for a while. I stopped playing it because the community had left the game. There wasn't a lot of people left. There wasn't many people to group with. People just kind of stood around and they talked and they reminisced, but nobody really played the game like they used to. I mean, 'cause let's face it, guys, the game was dead before it got shut down. And that's a fact. If that pisses some of you off, I'm sorry. But it really was. It was dead before they shut it down. Nobody was there. There was like, I don't know, a couple hundred people or something like that. Nobody ever really grouped. I remember seeing my wife play it back in 2010. And she was trying to get groups. She couldn't get groups. She couldn't do anything. And what she mostly did was stand around in Freeport. And I remember watching her in Freeport and nobody really did anything. And I remember she went to work and I had the day off. And I fired up the game and I ran around Freeport and everybody was just standing there AFK. Every person I walked up to and waved to, there were a couple of people I recognized from back in the day. I'm like, hey man, how you doing? Nothing. They were just standing there. They weren't playing the game. They were just AFK. And that's really what it was in the end. A bunch of people standing around Freeport, AFK. Some people were talking. Maybe a couple people would get together and do things. And I know there were some people that tried to rekindle it, like Bo Jackson. He did the EQOA Rebirth. And, kudos to him for that. There were people that tried to get the game fired up again and tried to bring people back into the community. But when you got a game that's $15 a month, they're not adding anything to it. I mean, they did add a few little things here via patches, but they didn't add expansions. They didn't add $15 worth of content to the game. And, they were disappointed with EverQuest Online Adventures sales from the beginning. They expected 100,000 people at minimum. I believe that's what they were looking for, because they had this cultural phenomenon called EverQuest on the PC. So when they got 20 to 30,000 people, they just, they were very upset about that. It was way below expectations. It didn't even meet halfway on the expectations list. So they just walked away. They were like, screw this. But they didn't understand that MMORPGs on a console, EverQuest was pretty much the first one, unless you count Phantasy Star Online, which I really don't. I mean, I know it was an online RPG, and I think you had to pay for it. I believe there was a subscription fee, but still, it wasn't like a wide open, you didn't have a whole bunch of people in the world. It was more like a Monster Hunter style game where you got into a lobby and then 4 people went out, and 4 or 5 people, I can't remember the size of the party, would go out into their own little instance. That's not, for me, that's not an MMO. But anyway, the point is they expected it to do better. It didn't do better. And the reason why it didn't do better is, first of all, console gamers weren't really used to online at that point. It was very new. PlayStation 2 and the original Xbox, it was new. And not only that, you had a network adapter that got in the way. There was another barrier there, where not only was online gameplay new, you had a network adapter you had to go out that cost the same as pretty much a full release game. And not only that, you had a subscription fee in the way. So no shit, it didn't do that good. When you play on PC, all that stuff is there already. Those guys were used to online play. They were used to having to pay a subscription fee for games. That's something that, they're very much used to on PC. And console gamers, most of them are more casual than that. They want to play shooters or action games. Now, I'm not saying you guys, any of the EQOA crowd was casual or EQOA was a casual game. I'm not saying that at all. Absolutely not. But most casual gamers are on console. Let's face it, So, yeah, they just didn't really embrace the game. And these are the things that go through my head when I think about EQOA. What made it special? What made it better than everything else? How come it didn't succeed as well as games that, in my opinion, are far beneath how awesome it was? How come it just didn't sustain itself? Now, most people would probably think, dude, it lasted 9 years. It was a success. I wouldn't say it was a flop, but I don't know if I'd call it a complete success at the same time. I mean, they did make money off of it, but they made one expansion. And when I think about it, it still pisses me off, because if they just would have brought out maybe one expansion more, they would have brought back some people, and they might have said, well, we can keep this going as long as we keep bringing out low-priced expansions, things that we don't have to. They didn't have to add a whole hell of a lot. We weren't that picky, all right? They didn't have to add a whole hell of a lot. But when I take a look at the EverQuest map for the PC, and I take a look at the map that was given to us for EverQuest Online Adventures, you see that there's a lot of shit that we didn't get in EverQuest Online Adventures. So yeah, part of me is mad at Sony. And I know there's a lot of people who don't ever want to play another Sony game again. They're like, fuck you, Sony, and they're boycotting Sony. I'm not thinking like that, because I understand that what they had there was a business. And that's another thing about games. Gamers, they love games, okay? They love their games. And we absolutely loved EQOA. But it's kind of like a guy being in love with a girl that doesn't love him back. She just cares about how much money's in his wallet and if he's driving a faster car. And you know what? If another guy's got more money and he's got a better car, she's going to leave you. It's kind of like that. I mean, I'm not trying to sound sexist. I'm not saying that's what all women do. But it's kind of like that sort of scenario. If the money's not there, the developers are going to go somewhere else where the money is. So the game doesn't love you back, man. It just doesn't, and it's really harsh, because we love it to pieces. We absolutely loved it, and it meant a lot to us. For us, it became like a second reality, but it just didn't love us back. And I know a lot of people cried when it got shut down. It's kind of like being in love with a girl who takes off on you. It kind of felt like that. It felt like I was betrayed, stabbed in the back, and then walked out on me. I cried. My wife cried. I know a lot of people that cried. And I remember thinking, damn it, it's just a game. How come I feel this way? But it wasn't just a game. It wasn't. It was an experience, and I miss it. And I know you guys miss it. And yeah, happy birthday, EQOA. Maybe someday we'll get the game brought back. I doubt it, but it would be nice. But yeah, that's about all I got for you guys. I'm sorry if I ranted a little bit there, but yeah, I just had to get that off my chest. I thank you guys for watching, and I look forward to seeing you all in my next video.
Nostalgia. It's delicate, but potent.